I don't know, should we? It feels wrong in a car like this. And the GTR is all for it. Hell, in any car like that, they expect you to do it. But here, this is for people that set monetary policies around the world, not for car guy jackasses like us. But they do give us 601 horsepower. And the functionality, it's there. Okay, you convinced me. Let's stop. Left foot on the brake, come over to sport here, hit this button. Yes, activated. To the detent, and let's wait for it to get down. Oh yes. Bist du fertig? Ich auch. Oh, second gear is where it comes alive. It's not quite the pop you in the face like that GTR, but man, if you are an oligarch or you run monetary policy for a small, like, Bahamian nation, this'll work. This'll definitely work. So Kumo was going through the final edit of the tech review of this, the G12 7 Series, with a V12 engine, and he felt that I neglected something rather important about the construction of this engine, really the design, and that is where the turbos live. If you've seen many of our other episodes with Vs that have turbochargers, whether it's a BMW, Mercedes, whatever, most of those turbos live in the V nowadays simply for packaging reasons. This is one of the few that we've seen that the turbos live on the outside of the banks, thus making it a bit more wide, shall we say. It was definitely unusual for us to see, and that's why we wanted to point it out. Okay, now that we got the launch control yayas out of our system, let's take ourselves out of the jackass mentality, switch this back on. After all, we're driving 170 grand. I want to keep it in one piece. Keep this in sport. You know what? Let's put this in sport as well, because we really need it on this road. Put our foot into it. And our job today is pretty important. It's not determining whether this thing is fast. It's got 601 horsepower and 590 pound-feet of torque that comes in at 1,500 RPM, plenty quick. It's how does it deliver power as opposed to that B7. So let's come around here, put our foot into it coming out of this turn. Yeah, it's quick, but it's not as blustery as that B7. I would, if I'm really hard pressed here, the B7 probably is just that ever little bit quicker. However, if you were to have the same like professional driver in these two cars, I'd be willing to bet that these things would be neck and neck. It's that close. You know what? Let's not put aside being a jackass so quick. Let's go to these paddles here. Downshift 3. You know what? To demonstrate this, let's go to 2. Listen to that. Doesn't really sound like a 12-cylinder now, does it? It sounds almost like a high-revving Honda. Now, there's a reason for that. That is the natural sound, but it's amplified through the speakers in the car. It's not amplified as much when you're really pushing it like this. It's more around town with this grumble. They're like, man. Even your passengers are like, this is pretty cool. Even your Prius-loving passengers. And then second, you know what? Let's stay in second gear. I'm going to push this a little bit harder for you, and I want to prove a point. Notice, I know you don't like the sound or the abuse of the engine. There's the red line. There it is. We just hit the red line. It's not changing. It allows you to bounce off the red line in the M760. I love that programming. Granted, you'll probably screw up your car, but the ability to have complete control over the transmission and revving your twin-turbo 12-cylinder, I love that you have that kind of personal responsibility. After all, if you've attained this financial freedom where you could buy a $170,000 car, why not have control over your transmission? So Kumo felt it a good idea that before we get too far down the road in this episode, we really drive home the point how large this vehicle is. If you remember in our G90 V8 episode, we compared that car to the wheelbase of this 126.4, as well as the Mercedes. Here we feel we should go in the opposite direction and talk about the car that is based on this, the Ghost. That wheelbase, 129.7. In other words, only 3 inches longer, and that's a Rolls-Royce. Achtung! We are doing something that we should not be doing with a 5,200-pound car, even with 12 cylinders, and that is a twisty road going somewhat downhill. So, with that, langsam fahren. Now, this is the sport mode, both in transmission as well as all the different adjustable throttle, damper, all the steering mappings, all that stuff. This, it sort of works. Like, this ain't a GTR. It's not an M3, not trying to be an M3. It's composed when you drive it aggressively like this. Put it in the wrong place, it won't go well for you. You'll end up there. Where you and I have to focus, and this is not exciting for us, that is the comfort mode. And again, don't try this at home. Notice a lot more floaty here. But the big thing we have to focus on here is how is it differentiated from the B7 or even an S63 or S65? This clearly, the minute you get into this after stepping out of a B7, that's the last 7 Series I drove, this is calibrated for more, I don't want to say comfort, it's calibrated for the kind of person that would, what do they call them today? They're like activist investors. Yeah, activist investors. Back in the day, we called them corporate raiders, and that's still what they are. People who kind of sit in the back, maybe on Sunday they drive around the Merritt Parkway really quick when they're going to their Greenwich, Connecticut home. But the comfort mode is designed for them, where the B7, it's designed for the guy who is the entrepreneur. He owns his own business, and he does want to drive himself. So this is where the biggest change is. If someone were to say, well, they're the same horsepower on paper, it's the same car, I don't get it. Well, guess what? I didn't get it either, because I'm scratching my head, reading up on everything I can read up before this thing turned up. I just didn't understand how BMW has really 2 of exactly the same vehicles. But then I spent about a week driving this thing and quickly realized it's the way in which it drives. It's a totally different personality. Granted, in the sport mode, that's closer to the B7. The B7 is a bridge farther than this in terms of driving dynamics, but in comfort, this is a bridge farther than the B7 in terms of what its target market is. So in other words, you get the same grunt, you get the same pushing power, but you don't get the same driving dynamics. That is the real difference between these 2 vehicles. Oh, and frozen, dark, brown, metallic. Okay, I know you're taking over this bit, but this is a fancy car. I don't think the burlap is a nice addition. And I'd really prefer it if you didn't slobber on the back of this stunning, dark, frozen brown metallic. Here, you work on that. When you're done with that, can you sort this, please? Okay, so as we unpack a couple of notes, let's switch back into sport mode on the transmission, sport mode on the dampers, as well as the steering. Maybe dial it back a little bit. Let's talk about Apple CarPlay. Throughout this episode, you have noticed that I've set that screen deliberately to Apple CarPlay. And the reason why I wanted to share that with you is because that's not your average, ordinary Apple CarPlay. And I'll prove this to you by going a little bit slower. Notice, the phone ain't connected to the car with this. This is the second integration, I'd say in the world, second from BMW, that wireless CarPlay is fitted in their integration. I've played around with it a lot, like it a lot. It adds a lot of functionality. The only thing it's missing, it's not a BMW thing, it's an Apple thing. Why don't you join the Qi bandwagon? I mean, please. You already forced us the USB-C down our throats on our MacBook Pros. How about joining a standard here? Thank you very much. And then second, I spent some time after I got past just my excitement of the frozen dark brown metallic color and built one of these things online. And there's a couple of things, like, believe it or not, this is a standard color interior, this ivory, the two-tone. There you can get a cognac like we had in that B7. You can get, there's a red that's on offer, which actually looks kind of cool. I can't believe I'm saying that. You can change this out. There's different settings here. And then, of course, there's the individual program where you have to pay $1,700, and then you can do anything you want. So you can bring your own, like, swatch of wood and leather, and they'll just make it your custom car. And really, that is the point of why this car exists. It's kind of like going back in the day where you could have specified any body you want on any chassis of car. Now, you really can't do that today because of cost, I'd say more safety, because there is one guy that does it. He's a finance guy in New York. He does it with Ferrari. He's done like 3 one-off Ferraris. They're very cool, but I can only imagine how much that cost him. I don't think someone would do that with a sedan, even one like this. But what can be done is you can start with the serial production car, if you could even call this serial production, and then you could spec out literally any combination you want. You could roll in there and say, you know what, here's a swatch of wood from my cabin in northern Michigan. I want the dashboard to look like that. Or I want the cognac interior with my dark frozen brown metallic exterior. Or you can change things in the back. Like this one is not fitted with the executive rear seat package, although it can be fitted with the executive rear seat package. And then you could probably do some even more wild color on the outside. I will give you an additional fun fact in this episode. As unique as this car is, specifically with the color and the combo here, when I turned up to get it, there were 2 of them right next to each other. I guess that doesn't say as much about the car as it does about Los Angeles. So Kumo and I really can't get through this entire episode without geeking out over the stunning color and trim choices of this frozen dark brown metallic G12 7 Series. I know I repeat this too much between these 2 episodes, but I just love the name of the color. But it's also the trim that they have selected. They call it cerium or serum or something like that. Notice the kidney grills, the bezels of the kidney grills, the trim above the revised spoiler, the mirror fairings, and even the little V12 logo in the rear is all finished in this cerium. Why don't we agree on cerium? And the combination of that with the satin finish brown, almost black, with a 2-tone white and black with leather and suede interior, this, as he would say, only one word, wunderbar. Now, just an aside before we press on in this episode, and we should downshift for this. There you go, 2nd gear. The Rolls-Royce Dawn, the last roller that we drove, same engine. Didn't sound like this, and it certainly didn't feel like this. Now, there's one important piece of information that he and I have neglected to share with you over these past 2 episodes. And yes, we did share this information with you in many Mercedes episodes, but not this one. And we feel it's germane to this discussion. What we prefer between an S63 and an S65. For a recap, an S63 is a twin-turbo V8, where the S65 is the twin-turbo V12, much like this. And in that case, the S63 is the faster, sharper car, but if we were pressed, we'd always choose the S65. Yes, there's something about it. Yes, it looks a certain way and it's got certain accoutrements that make it better, but for us, it just falls under the heading of every car guy or gal needs to have a V12 at least once in their life. Which brings us to this. This is not as easy as a discussion because that B7, man, it's super sharp, way sharper than this. But this, I don't know if it's the frozen dark brown metallic or the way the colors and the trim come together or the fact that it all works with a 12-cylinder or really the fact that this was all done under one house, specifically designed, it just works. Not better than the B7, but it just works. So if we were pressed to make a decision between the two, we'd probably have to at least plead the fifth or completely abstain from the decision. And with that, we're gonna turn this around to you guys, and we're gonna make you decide. If you had to choose between the sharper B7 or just the more uptown M760i or IL, what would you choose? And most importantly, why? Because I want to know if that color sways you. Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV all in word, MotoManTV all in word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, we want to leave you with two things. Number one, please unsubscribe. You want to tell them? And then click resubscribe and click notifications, because that's how much YouTube has screwed up the platform for YouTubers big and small. And number two, I want to leave you with a fun fact. So before the boss man here at the show was taking a nap, getting a suntan on his little burlap magic carpet, he was chasing mice around here. So while I was fooling with the V12, this guy was going back to his predator instincts. Who knew? Until we see you next time, bis später.